just gonna put my foot on the floor and I'm not lifting till I see God or a checkered flag.
Hello, and welcome back to episode 12 of Racing Thoughts and IndyCar podcast. I'm Megan Dennis.
And I'm Meg Taylor. Oh boy, do we have a lot to get through this week, huh?
Yeah, there is a good bit of news. There's a good bit of, controversy with that news too, and two races. So fully expect this to be a two-part, not series, but I guess two-part episode with this, because there's absolutely no way we could cover everything that happened. I would argue maybe the best race weekend of the year.
All right, so I guess to start us off, IndyCar kind of started everything by clarifying like the restart rules after everything that went down in Portland with Newgarden restarting, and they had included like a painted line on the track to mark the end of that restart zone. So I guess that's a positive that comes out of all of that. And I mean, I don't know, I don't have much else to say that I haven't already said on it. So good for Indy, I guess, for clarifying that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's really what it comes down to. And then, I mean, them stating that they're not going to redo any of the rest of the rules, but that clearly this was an issue. And so and the drivers were the ones who asked for the clarification because they were saying, in the car, yeah, there's this line, but like we have nothing to see. Like you can put a graphic up on TV, that doesn't help us in the car.
I mean, that's really fair. Like, I feel like we do, as the viewer, see a little bit more just full picture, obviously, because we're not the ones that are behind the wheels of the car. So having that to our benefit makes it easier for us, but it also kind of puts our perspective very differently than that of the drivers. You can cry wolf all day, every day from sitting on the couch watching it on TV, but at the end of the day, we're not the ones that are driving and are impacted by this stuff. So I do think it was a smart move from Indy to actually do it. Should it have been done before a controversy? For sure. But yeah, that's really all it comes down to. Good for the drivers for advocating for themselves, though. I'm very happy to see that.
And that kind of ties into our next update. So we talked about Scott Dixon going out in lap one in Portland with Fittipaldi and got immediately blaming Kyle Kirkwood as kind of the means of it. And Kyle actually went to race control and they said, you need to look at how I was racing here and the fact that I was allowed to get away with that. He's like, yeah, as long as I'm allowed to get away with it, of course I'm going to do it. But he's like, but that's a problem, is that you're allowing us to race guys off into the grass. And, that caused people to get clipped and taken out of the race completely. Mm-hmm. And then Scott actually turned around and said that, he called Kyle amateur for it, just being like, you did it to prove a point, but at what cost? And I'm like, I think I see both sides of it. And I think it does say a lot that Kyle was willing to actually own up to be like, yeah, I did it. I did it to prove a point that we have a problem.
Yeah, I mean, I think Kyle did a good job again for advocating, going to race control, being like, this is a problem. And I don't love that Dixon was calling it amateur on his part, but I mean, I don't know. Feels weird. The whole situation is sticky.
And I guess I'll clarify, he wasn't necessarily calling Kyle going to race control amateur. The fact that Kyle was willing to race like that to prove a point, he was calling amateur, which I guess I can see kind of,
but like at the same point, I don't think so. Like if these things, like we don't know what happens behind closed doors. And I wonder, just from what I know about Kyle and him as a driver and like as a person, he doesn't seem the kind of guy who would do something like this to prove a point on the very first time he's trying to do so. He seems like the kind of guy that has gone to race control, that has gone and talked to people and brought this up verbally. Again, don't know if that's the case, but this just seems like the kind of person he might be, is just like trying to resolve it beforehand and then them just kind of brushing him off as like, yeah, no, whatever. And then, okay, guess what? Actions have consequences. And this is kind of perfect example of, well, you ignored me until you couldn't. To me, that's what it seemed like. Of maybe he's tried. And since we don't know what goes on behind closed doors with meetings with race control and officials, maybe it was ignored and maybe he just got frustrated about it and was like, all right, well, if you're not going to listen, I'm going to make you listen. That truly is, at least from my perspective, what seems to have happened.
I agree with that. We know drivers have brought it up in drivers' meetings throughout the year because we've seen it happen more than once. I really think it's Scott's still mad, And I just
For
really
sure.
kind of want to turn it around and be like, Scott, you would do the same thing if
Mhm.
you had been in Kyle's shoes and could have gotten the chance to get ahead. Like, don't act like you're better because you've been in this series longer. Like, that we know that's not true. Like, at the end of the day, you're a racer. There was a gap there. He took advantage of it. You unfortunately paid the price and like tough shit.
Yeah, and I guarantee you, I'm not gonna be the one to do this because Dixon has been in this sport for far too long to actually do it. But I am sure that if you go through his races in his career, you will see that exact move at some point. And so I do think you can't be in the sport as long as he has been and not have made a move that is almost the exact same, if not very similar. So if someone wants to be petty and prove a point, go watch Scott Dixon's races and see if he pulls that exact move because I think he could probably benefit from a little refresher, maybe.
Yeah. So yeah, that was the update from Portland, and really just to follow up from that, I thought it was interesting, so I wanted to touch on it. Other bit of interesting news that kind of counteracts exactly what we said in the last episode of we talked about Christian Rasmussen, or Ginger Chris, as I've started referring to him as, being done at Portland because he is not racing ovals. Well, it was
Yep.
literally like the next day that Ed Carpenter came out and said that, and I really commend Ed Carpenter for this. He's saying that as a driver, he feels like he is hurting the team. And so, with a vested interest for the best of the team as the owner, that he felt the need that he needed to step down. And he took himself out of the car and put Christian in for these two races in Nashville to finish out the year. And that can't have been easy. I mean, Ed was saying, like, this isn't a retirement, but he's like, I also have to look at it as we're competing for that last spot in the leaders circle. I would be failing at my job if I put my interest as a driver first over the interest of the team as a whole. And as much as we don't really like Ed Carpenter, he gained respect from me for that one, for the fact that he recognized that like he was causing problems if he were to be the one to continue to drive.
Very fair. I think on the flip side, you could also see it as him taking a step back to avoid responsibility if they do miss out on that, like, what is it called? The leader circle or the winner circle or whatever it's called. And like, if they do miss out on that, he can be the one that's like, well, that wasn't my fault as a driver kind of situation. And I don't want to think that that's the case, but honestly, that was the first thing that I thought of when I heard that Christian was going to be in the 20 for the rest of the season on the ovals. I was like, ooh, I wonder if Ed's not going to be taking responsibility if they miss out on that. But it's a win-win for Ed Carpenter. Like, if they do end up getting that last spot, then he could be like, oh my God, I made such a great business move and decision. And oh my God, look at our, driver, Christian, who's now going to be competing with ovals because he's so good. Look at that. He got us onto that leader spot. Or it's, well, he didn't get us our leader spot. So, it wasn't my fault because I wasn't the one that was driving the car kind of situation. So I have a little bit more of a cynical perspective on it, but that's also just me and my opinion on it. So all of that to say, Ginger Chris, I love that you're going to be finishing out the season with us. So yay.
I guess I'll go ahead and say it now because I don't think I made notes on it. But he had a good weekend for race one and race two. Nothing
Yeah.
amazing, but it was good enough. So you know what? Good job, Ginger Chris.
Go Ginger Chris.
Before we jump into kind of the big news of the week, I'm going to touch on two, I guess, kind of smaller things. First, charters are going to be sent out to team owners and all the information on that, supposedly by the end of this upcoming week. So Penske Entertainment has finalized everything that's happening with there, and the owners should be getting the official documents. With that, that means the official announcement is expected to come following the end of the season. So Nashville's 2 weeks away, and then really go into here's charters, here's what that means. Again, I'm not going to spend the time going in depth on that right now because we don't know what we don't know. And then other bit of news, which I guess we could also talk about at the end of the race, but we'll just say it now and get that done. Linus Lundqvist took Rookie of the Year. He officially won that one, so congrats to him.
Well deserved. He had a very good season, and it was always fun to watch him race. Still is. So good job, Linus.
We'll see what happens with him for next year, but
Yeah, yes, we will.
good for him. All right, big news of the weekend outside of the racing: Pato versus Mark Miles of Penske Entertainment. Meg, you want to take this one?
Yeah, I've got some thoughts. So, for those who haven't been made aware, where been because it's been everywhere. But to give you a brief rundown, NASCAR has announced that they are racing in Mexico City on June 15th of 2025. And if you guys know anything, Pato is a Mexican driver. He was born and raised in Monterrey. And so he has been advocating for a Mexico City race for years. Like long time. And with NASCAR announcing their race in Mexico City, everyone within the IndyCar community has just kind of been like, what the hell is happening? Like, why are we not here? And, we have a ton of drivers who are coming out in support of Indy and Pato, just being like, we are missing the mark here. Like, Scott Dixon was saying that this is a massive miss on us. I don't know how we let that happen. Hello, being like, everyone is overtaking left and right on like expanding the driver's market with that kind of thing. And Indy has been struggling to sell tickets and just kind of market itself for a long while. And, between a lack of ticket sales and drawing crowds like other series like Formula One and NASCAR, it really comes down to IndyCar's outdated marketing and lack of promotion for their own series. But in addition to just completely not evolving with the times with fan demands and all of that kind of stuff. Perfect example was the Milwaukee Mile was added back, like we just saw. We were just there because fans were demanding a return of more ovals in the series, and yet the turnout was minimal. Like, there weren't a lot of people that were there for a doubleheader weekend for a historic track like Milwaukee Mile. And again, it goes back to minimal marketing, a lack of promotion. A lot of the promotion that happens is via social media from like content creators. Like, you rarely see IndyCar promoting itself. You don't see it on TV the way that you see NASCAR and Formula One promoting themselves. Like, it's just not up to par for what Indy needs to do in order to really draw in those crowds and get the ticket sales that they need. CEO of Penske Entertainment, his name was Mark Miles, is claiming that they have not secured a Mexico race because Pato is not famous enough. And let me pull up the direct quote so that I can make sure I am quoting him exactly. He is saying, I will say that it's clear that Pato isn't as famous as the last previously famous Mexican driver, Adrian Fernandez, but he's really gaining ground and he's actually on some billboards now. Miles has said that in conversation with the partners at the Mexico City track, saying, if you want us to rent you the place, we'll rent you the place, but we don't want to partner because we think it's too early. Quote, you're not well enough known yet to be in Mexico City. And then he goes on to say is what that means is they have a view that we're not well enough known, nor is award yet to populate an event at that track. And so he's basically insinuating Pato is not famous enough to sell out Mexico City in order to get an IndyCar race there. Now, that has a whole lot of problems with it on many, many levels. I think the first is putting all the responsibility on one driver to sell out a race in a city. But two, to insinuate that Pato Award is not famous enough is actually absurd. And I love how the drivers have reacted. I love how social media has reacted to all of this because it just kind of proves a point to Miles that, oh no, he is famous enough and he is actually more famous than you think. Like, obviously Pato is a McLaren driver and he is the Formula One McLaren reserve driver he does like all of the FP practice one sessions for F1 McLaren. He goes to the F1 races when he's not in season for IndyCar. Like, once the IndyCar season's over, he's going to be traveling to the rest of the F1 season with McLaren in the garage. Like, he's there. Homie can't go to these races without extra security because he gets mobbed. And especially in the Mexico City race. Like, he is not even an F1 driver and he gets that attention. I don't know how true this is, but this may just be like my perception of things. But honestly, Pato is more popular in the Mexico City race than like Checo fans in terms of frenzy. Everyone who goes to the Mexico City race basically is a Checo fan because Checo is Mexican driver on the Formula One grid. However, considering the access that people have to Pato in the paddock, he creates a lot more of a fan frenzy because he's able to kind of walk around, and he is a lot more accessible when it comes to like IndyCar races. So people think that kind of translates over into the Formula One paddock. Again, that's just my perception of things. I don't know how 100% true that is in that comparison. But I mean, you look at pictures and videos of Pato in the Mexican paddock at the F1 races, and he looks like he's freaking Harry Styles with how he's just getting swarmed and like the extra security that's needed. Like that alone should tell you how famous Pato is. And then, you know, you get people who are F1 fans who are like, yeah, I don't even watch IndyCar. I don't know anything about it, but I know who Pato Award is. Everyone knows who this kid is because he is genuinely the face of IndyCar. You have to be dumb to not think that just because he has spent so long and so many years building his marketability, building his brand to get people to watch this sport. Like, this is what he wants. Like, he's even been quoted in saying, I believe the purpose of going to Mexico is to help everyone and help everything in IndyCar grow. My mentality has always been, how can I be better? And how can we all be better and get bigger and make this a better experience for other people? We're an entertainment, man. As much as we love to race and we're here to win and all of our efforts go into that, there's a lot of efforts that go into making the sport grow bigger because that's ultimately what will allow us to keep going. Like, he had a whole plan that he brought to Mark Miles and Penske Entertainment of like, this is exactly what you need to do. Like, he goes, we opened the playbook in order to try and get an IndyCar race in Mexico City done. So to be honest, this is all very disappointing. I don't know what their conversations have been, but I've been trying for 3 years and I know I've done a lot for the series in order to make it bigger and bigger. I'm quite disappointed they didn't come to me after I've been trying all these years and been willing to put my own money on the line to make this happen. Like I said, he has been building his marketability and his brand for years. And I don't know where Mark Miles was coming from when he was saying these comments. Truly, I really don't. Because you look at just pure fame factor of Pato Award should be enough to sell tickets in Mexico City. But I do think that putting it all on his shoulders is wildly unfair, and it does a disservice to the rest of the grid. It might make them feel like, oh, well, I'm not clearly enough for the series to help them grow and be better. And that's like a really feeling for a driver to feel, I'm sure. But I don't think he understands how hard the Latino community goes for their people. Like, even Rossi was like, had put out a tweet, and like many other drivers and people did like voice their support, whether that was on Twitter or just like in press conferences and everything. But one of the main points that I have kind of like latched onto with the tweet that Rossi had sent out, where he listed like 6 or 7 reasons why Pato was more famous than people thought. Can you read it? I believe it was number 3.
Yeah, so Rossi put out this tweet, has 6 things on it. A couple are definitely jokes, but reasons I can think why Pato Award is actually as famous as he thinks he is while I'm sitting on the couch. 1, his fan base is so loud that when they chant, we can't actually complete an engineering debrief in Portland of all places. 2, needs his own merch tent because people buy out the official one of all his gear. 3, specific team-only activations in Hispanic neighborhoods that I have attended have been made to feel like a superstar just because I'm next to Pato. 4, has 6 times the social media following of American 500 winner, Rofosek himself. 5, the only driver that I know of, despite his questionable taste, can have a partnership and make inroads with the fashion industry. And 6, has a jet. Kidding.
So I think that really kind of outlines a lot of people's thoughts with it, of just like, he has so many things that are going for him outside of IndyCar that bring people to him. And like the number 3 one, where it's like the certain activations in Hispanic neighborhoods where he's meant to, where like Rossi feels like a rock star just because he's next to Pato, is crazy. But that is a lot of what Hispanic and Latino fans are like for their people. They have their people and they go hard for them. And so to insinuate that these fans wouldn't do that if you brought a race to them, it's frankly insulting. And I take issue with that. I think people can insinuate what I mean, but I'm not going to say it outright. But I wonder if there's certain biases that are at play there. But like Pato's had his plans of trying to grow interest in this sport, and he's done a phenomenal job. I mean, even Alex said it in his tweet of he has 6 times the following of a 500 winner who is also American. It just proves a point. And like anybody who's ever actually met Pato as well, like we were lucky enough to meet him in Barber, and he was the nicest guy. He took time to talk to all of us. He took time to take pictures. Like, and this was every day and every single time that he left pit lane. Like, he was on it the entire time. And that's not to say other drivers aren't, but when you are as big as Pato and have that big of a fan base where people are literally gathering outside of your pit box the way that people were when we were there, and he still takes the time, even after what was a really crappy qualifying day for him, he still took the time to stay and like take pictures and talk to people and talk to us. He does not have to do that, but this is what he wants. He wants this series to grow bigger and better, and he's had plans like the whole Pato TV thing that he had for a while that Penske shut down because they wouldn't give that platform the rights to stream his live onboards, which is absurd, but it's just like it really bothers me. And you know, you also have Felix Rosenquist, who was his former teammate, also come out and tweet say like in support of him, being like, we've had like race debriefs where we've had to like speak over the intercoms because Pato's fans are so loud. You know, you have people like Will Power who in the press conference for the podium being like, I forget exactly what he said, but it was just like one of those Pato who moments of just like, yeah, people know the star power that Pato has because one, he's a really nice guy and he markets himself well in a capacity that Indy is just struggling to do. And I don't know why they're being so bullheaded about it and taking shots at easily your most marketable and your most famous driver. It blows my mind and it really makes me upset. I don't know how else to explain it. Oh, one last thing. Sorry, before before you can interject. One last thing. Both Pato and Mark Miles have come out to admit that an IndyCar race in Mexico City may no longer be possible because you have Formula One and NASCAR on the docket for them, which makes it very difficult for the track to be able to accommodate all of it. So if it does not happen, that is a massive, massive fumble on Mark Miles and Penske Entertainment. And I don't know. And then the other thing, I swear this is the last thing before I can move on after this, is that Mark Miles, the day after making all of these statements, issued another statement on Saturday morning saying, as I said repeatedly yesterday, Pato is a natural star and his popularity is tremendous and growing. It's unfortunate that a few of my additional remarks fail to convey anything other than this viewpoint. He is a marquee personality for our series and a terrific partner in our marketing and promotional efforts. We continue to invest in our drivers, and Pato absolutely continues to be a primary individual we direct resources and support to. In summary, Mexico remains a market of heavy interest, and we believe there will be an amazing IndyCar race weekend there sooner rather than later. Pato is a superstar, and his popularity and talent will be critical to making this happen. That is the biggest load of PR bullshit apology I've ever heard. And it just feels like he's backtracking because of the backlash that he got from fans online, fans in person, and drivers and teams. Like it just was like he thought everyone was going to be on his side on that and then realized quickly how he was in the wrong. And so now he's trying to make amends for it, being like, no, you misunderstood me, even though you are quoted as saying Pato is not famous enough for this. All right, sir. Sit down. This is not the time or place for that. All of this to say, Pato should go to NASCAR for Mexico City. That's where I end.
I don't even know how I follow any of that up. You hit the nail on the head with most of it, so there's not a lot for me to add to it. I do think it's really stupid on Mark Miles' point to not lean on the drivers, and not that it should ever be on the drivers to grow the series. That's not their job, but it is one thing you touched on in the beginning. And I will say I think my favorite tweet was Pato's when he posted the billboard of NASCAR advertising them going to be in Milwaukee, and the fact that like this big push for ovals and it was not marketed well at all. It was not sold well at all.
No.
And I do think I've seen a lot from drivers today that like I think the fan turnout was better than they maybe thought it was going to be, but it still wasn't what it should have been, what it should have been promoted as, which is frustrating when like Hy-Vee sponsored this race. We saw what Hy-Vee did for the Iowa series with that doubleheader. So why wasn't that the same? And so I think, I guess, take the Pato and Mexico and all that out of it because you've touched on that and I agree with everything you said there. I think it's also just like IndyCar is failing at their job to continue to try to grow the series. And yeah, I guess we'll see what does it look like going to Fox next year. Does that change anything? What is this NASCAR crossover that they want to do? Does that change anything? I don't know, but at the end of the day, like, if I'm the captain looking at what Penske Entertainment is doing and promoting the series that I own, I don't think I would be very happy. And I definitely wouldn't be happy to seeing that the drivers that can help grow this series are the ones being alienated.
100%. And someone had brought it up too that the only marketing and promo that I ever see for IndyCar is for the 500, which fair. That probably should be the thing that you market most, considering that is like your marquee race, right? That's not the only thing that brings you money and revenue. You have a whole season in all of these different places. You should be promoting them as well. Like, you are going to drown your series dry if you don't start promoting these other races because they're such cool tracks and they're cool cities that you could do so much with. You can expand into Mexico City. I mean, we know that they're not opposed to expanding into other places because look, they already go to Toronto. Okay, great. Love that. It's really a failure of IndyCar's marketing that this is as bad as it is. And like we constantly get ads and emails and stuff for Nashville in the past couple months of like, oh, prices have dropped even further, like buy one get one, like whatever the promo deal has been because they cannot sell tickets. Well, okay, why would I? I don't have an incentive right now to go, or like I don't, granted, I would love to go to Nashville for this last oval race, but work sucks. So kind of have to be there. But it's like if the only marketing that you're doing is sending an email to someone who's already signed up that ticket prices have gone lower, then that's kind of a failure on you. I'm not seeing any other promotion. I'm not seeing marketing that's outside of what I'm signed up for because I'm an IndyCar fan. But you're not updating and staying with the times with it. And that's really going to hurt you in the long run. I mean, we're already seeing the results of it now. So I don't know. It's sink or swim in this business, and they are currently sinking.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was yesterday we were talking about it of like, 100 Days to Indy is a fantastic show, but they stopped filming at the end of May
Mm-hmm.
versus like everything else that has been the rest of this season in a season that's been so good both on and off the track. And it's
Yep.
like that would be another way to promote the series at large, not just the 500.
Yeah, sure. It's on Hulu and they just put it on Netflix and stuff. But like, if someone who has never watched IndyCar ever just decides to throw it on, they would think that, oh, yeah, the season ends after the 500. I'm not going to watch anything else. I'm not going to care about that. I'm just only going to watch the 500, or like I'm only going to watch up to the 500 or something like that. You have people who shockingly can be casual fans of something.
That exists.
Can't relate. But it's like these people are going to watch it at face value and be like, oh, maybe if I see that the 500 is on, maybe I'll throw it on. But like, it is a phenomenal series that I wish would extend for the rest of the season because I mean, you missed the entire second half. Like, this season alone has been phenomenal. Like, we have a proper title fight, and we're going to get into this more later. But I argue that the second half with a proper title fight right now is just as exciting as the 500 was because it's spanning over a long period of time. It's gaining investment from a viewer's perspective. And you get people who were fans of F1 with the proper title fight between Lewis and Max in 2021. That is so exciting. But like, those types of fights are very exciting and they make for good quality TV. And with the production value of how the CW and Hulu puts on for, 100 Days to Indy, I would love to see all of that kind of stuff. And I know a lot of other people would too, because girlies live for the drama. You got to put it in there.
So especially adding in like the season silly season of like I
Yeah.
would love, and I guess maybe that's the downside of like a lot of that is behind closed doors stuff. So like the CW's way of producing everything where it's film in a week, produce in a week, out in a week probably wouldn't work for all that. But I would love, okay, season ends or now that we've gotten David Lucas announcement, what led to that? Because that shocked all of us. Like there's
Mm-hmm.
between this and like Formula One, and I've said this more than once lately, of like, I am so much more invested in the world of IndyCar and what's happening here. And we'll get into it with these races, but like this weekend was so much fun as a race fan.
Yeah. This was the most fun I have had as a race fan in a long time. And like, sure, I had some really phenomenal things happen, but also some not so phenomenal things happen. But it was still high quality entertainment as a fan to watch, despite how disappointing some of it was for me. But it just like that kind of stuff would be so, so fun to watch. And, it doesn't even have to be on like network TV. Would that be fantastic? For sure. Put it on out as like a YouTube series or something if you are worried about like partnerships with TV. That would be so cool. And that would get a lot of interest for sure. So it's just like, I don't know. I think all of the influx of fans that like IndyCar has been getting over the past few years has purely been because of driver engagement and content creators. Truly. I got into this sport because like again, I was a fan of Formula 1 first, saw Pato, saw him do an FP1 session and was like, "Oh, he's good. Who's that?" And then decided I'm going to watch him. Lo and behold, got sucked in. Like, that is exactly how that works. And that's exactly how I know so many other people have gotten into it, is again by that. So, again, back to the insinuation that Pato is not famous enough for that. Okay, I would beg to differ. But it's just like you also have people like She Loves F1, who's no longer She Loves F1. It's a different username, but like Michaela. Like she was huge into IndyCar too and was posting about it on her socials going to the 500 with her dad before he passed. And I'm like, that also looked like a blast. So I was like, okay, maybe I'll start paying attention even more. And then for sure got into it because, it was hilariously enough, Barber was the first race I ever watched. And I was at the gym and I was literally on the mats doing core exercises with my phone in my hand, not actually doing any exercises because it was so fun to watch. So it's just like they're missing a huge opportunity to really bring in a lot of other fans because the series is so fun. The racing is fantastic. The drivers are phenomenal. And I'm just like, I hate to see that this is the reality of it.
Yeah, completely. And it's one where it's like, I mean, part of me is like, no, I don't want new fans. This is my series and I don't want to share. But like, that's just me being selfish in the matter of the accessibility of IndyCar is what makes it fun and what we don't get with anything else. As opposed to like Formula One, everything's been priced out. And I don't know, I think it's just one where they gotta do something to get folks invested, which does mean growing the series because if we want the series to stay as good as quality it does mean you gotta get new fans and you gotta be willing to embrace younger audience, and especially as like drivers continue to get younger, recognize that like that is the growth and you can't rely on the same 40 to 60-year-old men being your core demographic anymore. And you shouldn't want that if you're from a marketing standpoint.
Yeah. I mean, like this goes into like a larger conversation of accepting fangirls into spaces like this because we are both historically One Direction fans. And, everyone knows the chaos that was One Direction fandom back from 2010 to 2015. It kind of stems from a similar place of we have been highly influencing, I say we as in fangirls, have been highly influencing Billboard's Top 100 and just the music scene in that capacity. And you see people like Harry Styles who have made comments about, like, I would not have a career if it wasn't for what fangirls do. And, you get people like that who embrace that side of things and make it work for them. And that's a phenomenal thing, because you look at people like Harry Styles, you look at people like Taylor Swift who are openly embracing, female fans, and, all of the quote unquote silly things that people might look at and be like, well, what are you doing? Like dressing up in feather boas and glitter suits for Harry's concerts, and, all the friendship bracelets from Taylor Swift, and just that culture of things. And I've seen a little bit of bite with Formula One from that. We've seen it with certain teams, and we've seen it with certain drivers. And you see that content on social media get a lot more engagement because like people find like people online, right? So you find a girl who's, historically a fangirl of somebody, and all of a sudden that's on your TikTok algorithm on a completely separate fan base, but you're like, oh, well, that looks fun. Like, that looks like a space where I belong kind of situation. I'm going to check that out. And I just think it does a massive disservice if you ignore this influx of young girls who are now like interested in a sport. Like I think David Malukas is another phenomenal example of someone who's harnessing the power of social media here. Like, he's a weird little kid on social media, and everyone loves him for it because he's embracing it, and he's also embracing his fandom. And I see that working for him moving forward for a long time. I see his popularity growing the way that it already is, and he's embraced it. And that's exactly what they need to do. That's not to say that should be your only marketing strategy, but it significantly helps.
And I'll say that like we are seeing that from drivers. Like,
Yeah.
our friends at Off Track actually talked about it last week when Hinch and Rossi too, like Rossi didn't realize that like the friendship bracelets were originally a Taylor Swift thing, and that's where that kind of came from. But they were talking about how much like they do actually hold on to those bracelets. Like Hinch keeps all the ones he gets and he puts them around his mic stand and then he has them right there when he's podcasting. Kyle Kirkwood has talked about how he has a bowl by his bed that he puts all of his in. Scotty Mack says he has like a spot in his kitchen on his bus that he puts all of his in. And so like from a driver's standpoint, you have that appreciation and recognizing that they need to continue to grow. They need to embrace everything. And I think you're seeing that they are. I mean, look at Scotty Mack on Twitter last night. But you look at stuff like that, you look at these interactions, and I think the drivers are doing their part. What we're not seeing is the rest of the series, where their job is to promote the series, doing their part.
Yeah.
And that's the disconnect right now. You can't put it all on these drivers who they're growing their marketability. And you talked about David Lucas. I mean, I watched his vlog earlier today and it was great. Like, he's doing what he needs to, but you can't put it all on the drivers as the means to grow, because what happens when they retire? What happens when they decide to move to something else? What happens if they don't sign for another year because silly season, like, oh, you put all your faith in one or two drivers being the market of why they're coming. Well, if that's the only reason people are coming and they leave, what are you building your series on?
For sure. And like, you would have asked me a year ago if Pato were to have moved into like F1 or a different series, I would have followed that kid and just left IndyCar in the dust. But now, being much more invested in the series as a whole and like caring about other drivers, because again, they do a good job of marketing themselves with fan interactions in person and online. I'm sticking around for a long time. You can't get rid of me, IndyCar. Suck it. But like, I'm sticking around because I care about the drivers, but like, you make a good point. Like, if any of these drivers were to leave and like a single driver was the only reason a fan was tuning in, and I know that's the case for a lot of people, you're screwed. Like, I think about how people are saying Pato should go and do a one-off race with NASCAR, and Kyle Larson does the race for Pato because I think they race the same weekend or something. I think that would be absolutely hilarious for Pato to do, and I think that NASCAR would get a lot more viewership if that were the case. Because then you're getting all of the people who are Pato's fans and people who, like me, would want to prove a point of, no, I want to watch this race. One, because you said Pato isn't famous enough, but two, you think that there's not a demographic for a Mexico City race, that you can't sell it out, that there's not going to be viewership. Oh, okay. I'm going to be watching that race that weekend. I'm watching NASCAR that weekend. I've already decided. But it feels like they are stuck in their own ways and they are going to be the own reason for their downfall, not the driver's fault, like Miles is trying to put it off as. So that's all I have to say.
And I think we'll leave it at that.
That's all I got to say now. I know you're going to edit that out, but
I'm gonna edit that out. All right, so thank y'all for sticking around through all of that. And it's an important conversation to have. I think from there, let's jump into the mile part one.
Yeah.
'Cause we're gonna make this part 1 and 2 because
Yeah.
there's, as we said in the get-go, there's a lot to cover.
I'm going to let you take the reins on Quali because I was unable to watch it. I had my cousin's wedding on Saturday, so I did miss Quali and the race, but I did come back from the wedding at like 11 o'clock at night because so many of my friends had texted me being like, you need to watch this race. And I'm like, fine, okay. So I put a pizza in the oven and sat on the floor in my nice dress with my glasses on and put the race on. So I watched the race. I just didn't watch Quali.
I honestly didn't get to. I watched Quali on delay because I was continuing to move into my new house, and I have furniture finally. Praise Jesus! But I did get to watch a little bit of Quali to catch up on it. With that, we had 7 drivers this weekend with penalties for engine changes, which you take into the fact we had 5 last weekend in Portland. Like this is 13 in 2 weeks is insane.
A lot of Hondas too.
Yeah, so on the year, we've had 24 total penalties. 19 have been Hondas. The rest, I guess the remaining, what would that be? 5 have been Chevy, which I guess kind of makes sense when you consider that Scotty Mack was the first Chevy engine change last weekend.
Yeah.
But just, I mean, after this week, we got 1 weekend left. So I guess it does kind of go hand in hand, but just seemed like an insane number. I should have made note on who all the penalties, but I didn't. So yeah, that's what that is. Jack Harvey finally qualified on an oval. Good job, Jack. We're proud of you and your car. More importantly, let's say your car for deciding it when to work for you.
Truly, because it hasn't been his issue. It's always just been his car just crapping out on him. So good job for Jack Harvey's car.
Ferrucci almost sent it into the wall. I hate to say, good job, but like it was a very impressive save. Like it fully sideways, and I don't know how he managed to keep it out. So I guess good for him.
Meh.
I guess RRL was shockingly slow all weekend. Like it was no pace at all in any of the 3 cars. None of them qualified well. None of them raced well. Like it was bad.
But like I don't know if that's super surprising because they haven't been qualifying well or racing well on ovals.
It felt low, and maybe I'm just not, I said it last week. I forget about Graham Rahal a lot. So, like, I don't actually know what's happening with Christian Lunga. And,
Yeah.
like, I don't know. It felt actually like all 3 of them, because I don't feel like it's usually all 3 that
Yeah.
have really bad qualifying. It's like
No,
at least
that's
one of them is like kind of like high middle pack.
Mhm.
All of them are at the very bottom.
Yeah,
So.
no, that I can agree with you on. So quality results, I really think the only thing we really need to touch on is the fact that we had our divorcees, Scotty Mack and Joseph, both put it on pole. So Scotty Mack was on pole for race 1 and Joseph was on pole for race 2. We know how those went, but we're gonna get into it. So diving into race 1, this first point I think is so funny that you wrote down. Yeah, them opening this up on college football weekend. How do you feel about it?
Personally, it was annoying because, like, I really couldn't. I had the race on one TV and I had my Tide on another in 2 separate rooms. So I kept going back and forth. But it was also one where, like, okay, it's the US Open is going on right now. So
That's
I kind of missed some of the beginning of the race because I was watching Tommy Paul's match. Because for those who don't know, we're also big tennis fans. I'm a huge fan of Tommy Paul. I think it was I like that it was a doubleheader. And I guess we're getting in September. Football's back. NFL, I think, starts this week. College football is Labor Day weekend. You know, you have games Thursday through tonight of different things. So it's like there wasn't going to be no way to avoid a crossover. But having a Saturday night race on really opening Saturday of college football, you knew you weren't going to get that viewership. And then you add in the fact that, like, because of that, it was only on Peacock, which already meant viewership numbers were going to be a lot lower than they ever are normally. And it's just, I know they were working with what they had to work with, and like it's a double header. Like there's not a good way to do that, but I don't know. As someone who had like a lot of sports happening at once and wanted to watch them all, and very much wanted to watch every bit of this race because I like night races, it was frustrating of not really getting to give the race the attention that I wanted it to.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I kind of forgot that US Open had the crossover on Peacock too. So there's just a lot that was happening that did make it kind of difficult. And, I obviously wasn't watching it live, so I didn't have to deal with all of that back and forth stuff. But it is super frustrating. And I wonder if those types of things were like, I wonder if they were just not taken into consideration or if they were, and that was still the best result that they could have come up with.
I think the Olympics probably played a part into it this year because like we had those 3 weeks where NBC couldn't host any of that.
That's
Um,
true.
but I think that is why we're seeing the schedule we have next year, where like it's ending in August because of Fox's deal with the NFL and with the Big Ten summer relevant football conference for college football.
Tell us how you really feel.
It's a fact. Everyone agrees with me. It's fine. If you're a Big Ten fan, I'm sorry, I guess.
Listen, I'm not a college football fan, so I don't have any information to go off of on this. So
I think it had to be what it had to be because of the Olympics. I do think that's why we're seeing the schedule end as early as it does
yeah.
next year.
I mean,
That still doesn't explain a lot of the issues with the early part of the schedule, but that's neither here nor there. But
so yeah, let's
anyways, racing.
well, we had last week talked about, we don't know how many lanes of running we were going to have because Milwaukee has been repaved and we didn't know what tire deck was going to look like. But shout out Connor Daly for running that high line and making that work. Like that was really impressive. So that ended up working out very well for him. And, then of course we also have to say it, Ferrucci does work those like off racing lines very well. He really just commits to that and makes it work, which makes for some very interesting and very dicey racing. But yeah, I'm giving all the credit to Connor Daly on this one though.
I mean, he deserves it in the sense of just like we knew that second lane was going to be fine. The bottom lane was the one they were talking about. Like, okay, is it going to be able to run? When we did the practice and everything, it was too muddy to be able to. We didn't know what that bottom lane was going to do. Well, Connor Daly said, okay, like y'all are using these first two lanes. Let me go up high and take advantage of it. And he did. And I mean, dude started 18th, made a 12 spot in the first lap. Like
That's insane.
Connor was flying. There's a real funny clip of like them showing Connor driving past and like kids just like, oh, just, just every person that like Connor went by just being like, I'm just gonna go right on you. And so kudos to CD. Like he took the risk. He was the first one to go up there and say, you know what? Like if it doesn't work out, that's on me. But if it does, I'm gonna take advantage of it. And he did.
Yeah, that was a very risky, like high risk but high reward situation. And props to him for selling it and, making that decision. I feel like a lot of people might have been very hesitant to do it, but good for you, CD. We love to see it.
And it paid off. I mean, we'll go ahead and say like
Yeah,
Connor
did.
finished third. It's the highest finish he's ever had. It's also the highest finish JHR has ever had. And so
Yeah, their first podium ever.
clearly, like bringing him in was the right move.
Yeah, for sure. This is kind of exactly what I thought was going to happen with bringing him in for the ovals for the end of the season. It's just he's good on ovals. And I don't think that recently we've seen it because of situations outside of his control, really. But he is fast. He is good when he's got a good car underneath him. And that just really proved it. And I was like, yep, that was the right call. I'm really glad that they put their faith in him. And I'm glad that, he's making these decisions and kind of proving them right. So good for you, Connor Daly.
I wasn't mad at him this week, so it was all good on my book.
Yeah. I swear, you have like a one-sided toxic relationship with Connor Daly where you're just like, I'm mad at him this week, but I don't know why.
But he didn't make me mad this weekend, so it was fine. Good job, City.
It's
We're
fine.
proud of you.
We love it. Pillow was having himself a struggle weekend, but I guess like specifically in race 1, he was like sliding around everywhere. He had an issue with one of his pit stops where
Ooh, his pit
Power,
stops. It happened twice.
it happened twice, yeah.
It happened twice.
Where like Will Power's pit box is right in front of him and he clipped the rear tire guy twice. And like one of those times definitely is questionable. Like, I don't know. I think one of the commentators was saying like, oh, we've seen these games played, especially with a championship on the line. And I'm like, yeah, we can play games, but at the risk and safety of people on teams, I don't love. So if that was a game that was being played, stop that. That's not cool. But if it wasn't a game, dude, get better.
No, I definitely would like to think all of it was unintentional, but it's just one where the first time especially was so close. And
So
like
close.
he's trying to put on Will's tires. Where do you want him to go?
Yeah.
And then the second time, the fact that it happened twice, where it's just like, what are you doing? Like
Yeah.
this is stupid. Like I don't, without being right there, being close up, I guess I can't say like who was necessarily in the wrong spot, or maybe both of them were in the wrong spot. But it's just like, get it together.
Yeah. No, for sure. It just, I don't know, doesn't seem like a great situation to have on hand when there is a championship on the line between Willpower and Pillow. So lots of issues there.
Pit lane was a hot mess that whole
Pit lane
first
always
leg.
is a hot mess, but yeah, especially this weekend. Like, woof.
Yeah. Linus Lundqvist, again, just impressive weekend. We already talked about him getting Rookie of the Year. Oh, I guess I say impressive weekend. Let me rephrase that. Impressive race 1.
Yeah.
Because that's the clear statement there.
Great
It's impressive
clarification.
race 1 from Linus Lundqvist. And just, he was leading the race for a good handful of laps. And it was just
He
like,
was up there.
yeah. I honestly expected him to end up on the podium again. He didn't, but overall, just very, very good weekend for him. From what he's shown the last little bit, where it has been very impressive, I do hope it means that he has a seat somewhere. If that means all my other guys have seats first. Sorry, Linus, you're not one of mine. So,
Yeah.
for you, but with an asterisk beside it.
Correct. I think that's a great way to put it. Like, it's fun to watch him race because I do think he is very good. And I think, he's got a lot of potential. And I don't want to see him go, but I want to see my guys in first. So that's him. Then we had Erickson and Newgarden.
That was it was messy. And
It was a disaster, and Pelot somehow got around it and came out through it unscathed despite being right in the thick of it. Like if you guys saw it, like the way that Marcus and Joseph had kind of come together, it ended up having their cars like nose in on each other on the track. So there was not a lot of space for drivers to get around. And with Pelot just being right in the mix of it, I am genuinely shocked that he got away with it, but somehow did. And oh no, Joseph got taken out of the ovals. So sad.
Oh no, blue car got taken out of the ovals because I do love the PPG blue car. Did get to use my Michael on the phone meme again, which I love a lot. Sorry, Marcus. I will say, I would like your opinion if you have one on who's at fault because I watched that onboards and the replay with the race a few times and race control deemed it Erickson's fault. Really, I would say I don't think it's either of them to blame because, yeah, Erickson was the one making the move, but it really it was will to will racing. It just kind of seems like they both got caught up. I wouldn't say necessarily that either of them were to blame, but it was real funny at the end that they're sitting there, both in their cars, just pointing at each other, wagging their fingers, and then Joseph comes up and just wraps his hand around. I'm like, Oh, he might be about to like strangle him.
Okay, so I watched it again, and I it's really tough because they are so side by side, and I know the race control is like they put it on Ericsson, right?
Yep.
I do agree with that. I do think that that probably was the right call because Ericsson was going down around the inside to pass Joseph. Like he was the passing car. Do I think that Ericsson turned into him? No. Do I think it was just really close racing and it just kind of happened? Yes. But given the technicalities of Ericsson, one being the passing car, and two, doing so on the inside, and three, having a ton of car lengths and car widths between him and the end of the track there, like he was kind of close to Joseph. He could have avoided it if he went a little bit further down the inside, but I don't know. That's a really tough call.
I mean, both of them were out, so I guess in the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. I was curious to your opinion on the matter because, like I said, they gave fault to Erickson, and I would argue it was just kind of wheel to wheel racing. And I'm still just like, how do you put fault on that? But then we go back to thinking about Lucas and willpower at Gateway, and nothing was done. And that was a lot less controversial.
Yeah, no, it's just I don't know. This is where the inconsistencies come into play again. And like I know we've talked about it before when it comes to penalties and how they are enacted and enforced. That's the better word, how they're enforced. But I would agree. I would have personally said that that's just wheel to wheel racing. That's just really close. I don't think anybody was at fault, but I do see why they put it onto Marcus. I don't agree with it per se. I wouldn't have made that call if I was in charge of it, but alas, I am not in charge of it. So that's my 2 cents.
I'm gonna go out of order again from our bullet points. Save the best for last on that one.
Okay.
Colton Herta. I feel bad for him. And that he had a phenomenal drive. Again, most of the race, it was him and Pato kind of competing for the lead, and especially in that later half. He
Yeah.
goes in for a pit stop and they don't get the tire on well enough. And then you see later, and I don't think he spun out or anything like that, but like you just see later this just lone tire rotating down the track, and you hear one of the broadcasts, I think it was Kevin Lee, just go, "What tire is that?"
So fun fact, I fell asleep like rewatching the race, and that is the point that I woke back up, and I was like, "Whose freaking tire is that?" I was so confused. So yes, poor Colton Herta because he was having a very good race, and he should have been up on that podium for sure. I feel bad because it's just been such a string of bad luck for him, and I know we talk about it all the time, but it just hurts to see because he is so good and he deserves the like being on that top step. He deserves being on those podiums, especially with how he drives. But then you just get, an ill timed caution, or he gets run into, or a rogue tire comes off and it's just out of his control. And I'm just like, oh, the poor guy. Like, I just want him to do well and to, have the results that show the effort that he's putting in throughout these races because it constantly feels like it's always happening towards the end of a race. It's never he's taken out at the beginning or something like that. It's always towards the end where he's been putting in a lot of work and is doing a phenomenal job throughout and then just ends up not being able to produce the result that shows the work that he's putting in.
And then speaking of Andretti drivers, I gotta talk about my favorite, Mr. Consistency. It
Yes.
was
Yes.
nowhere. Oh, right, really all weekend, to be
Yeah.
honest. I say that, and he finished 12th. He did have a really impressive save. You actually sent it, I'd seen it on the watching the race, but you'd sent it to me if we were like, he got fully sandwiched between Ginger Christ and Grosjean. Grosjean was being a menace kind of all weekend. Again, that's neither here nor there, but he got completely sandwiched, and no, it was a no hand save where I'm just like, I don't know how you did that, but good job.
Even he was just like, oh my God.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah,
yeah, there we go. Good for you, Kyle. We love to see it.
me too. We already talked about Connor Daly, his best ever finish in IndyCar.
Yep.
Willpower was second, so
Yeah.
that kept our championship fight very interesting because
Very interesting.
Flo was not really anywhere to be to found in that race.
Nope.
I will say it was very interesting the tire stints, and we had talked about that last week on how
Mhm.
like, oh, the tire it's going to be like Iowa or I guess Gateway to a little extent. Like, there's not really going to be any deg. It's just going to be kind of a speed race, and I guess maybe it was, but I was impressed that we were on three or four stint strategies, which was definitely not what we saw at Iowa at all.
No. I think with, you know, Milwaukee was the place of a lot of testing. And I
Mhm.
definitely think that that had helped. And they had done specific, like, second and third lane practice sessions with that in mind. So that significantly helped with, you know, tire strategies kind of being more aligned with what we're used to on ovals. So despite the repave, we still got a lot of good tire strategies out there, which was it's always really interesting on ovals because you only have one kind of tire that you can run on. You can only have the primaries. So it really comes down to tire strategy of, all right, well, when are you going to pit? And, you know, with what cycle are you going to go through? How long are you going to last on your first stint, which is really what makes or breaks the rest of your race. So I always find oval tire strategies very interesting. And I'm glad that we kind of got that more classic feel with Milwaukee despite the repave.
And then I think for this episode, there's only one thing left to talk about. Meg, who won the race?
Uh, Pato who? Pato who? I don't know that name.
Never heard of the guy.
Jokes aside, Pato won. It was the biggest you ever.
You couldn't script it better. You really
I
couldn't.
literally couldn't have scripted it better. I just, oh, it was so sweet. Like, again, I was at my cousin's wedding and we were already at the reception and had had a few drinks at that point. And all of a sudden, one of my best friends, Julia, she texted me. She was like, Meg, I'm sorry. I don't think you can watch the races anymore. And I was like, oh God, who won? And she was like, do you want me to tell you? And I'm like, I'm gonna find out either way, just spoil it anyways. She was like, Pato won. And I was like, well, we're all getting a round of champagne. So I mean my cousins drink champagne in celebration. So I was very happy. I was very happy about that. And then it was so well deserved. And I freaking love his sombrero. His sombrero is so weird and it's so funny and it's so cool.
Well, and the story of that coming to be couldn't even be better because it's like
It's even
we've had
better.
all the yeah,
So
we've had all
funny.
these like statements back and forth the last 2 days going into the race, and I don't know who in the Aero McLaren group was just like, go get the sombrero. And they sent somebody to the Pato shop tent because he has to have one. You know, it's not
Mhm.
popular, but he has to have one. And apparently Papa Ward was chilling in there and they were like, we need the sombrero. And of course he was just like, no, absolutely take it. And they got it for him. So it's like, that's not something they just keep there on hand if he wins. It was, they were like, oh no, we have to go get this right now.
Yep. And he had it and he wore it throughout the entire podium celebration. He wore it through all the pictures, even in the press conferences afterwards. He was wearing it. And I'm like, this is just, it is so beautifully petty and stunning and beautiful. And one, it's a beautiful sombrero. Like it's very well done. It's not like some cheap sombrero that you get at like Party City or something. Like that is a well-made, customized one. And it's just stunning. Like it was the most beautiful thing after all of the comments and all of the noise that was surrounding him. And once again, Pato who? I don't know.
As Rossi said, slap it on a billboard.
So that concludes race one.
And that will
Race
conclude
two.
episode 12 because
Yeah,
I feel like we still have a good bit to cover with race
we do.
two and leader circle and the championship fight. So thanks y'all for listening. There's a lot in this episode. We will, in real time, we will be back in about a minute. And we will be back for, I guess, episode 13 after this.
And part two with race two. So see you over there, guys.
Bye.
Bye.